Well, it wasn't the best road trip for Kansas State. They fall in both games, and this one might not be the way we don't want it to be the way it's looking at. It's going to be a tough one. Let's talk about it here on Locked On Kansas State.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. Welcome to Big 12 After Dark. That's what the shades are for. It's not because I am half blind in this eye dealing with an eye infection. That is not the reason why they're on. The shades are on because I wear sunglasses at night. That's how cool. And I'm fumbling the intro words and everything, but we are back. And we are ready to roll here at Locked On Kansas State. Thank you so much for watching. I'm joined with Jeff Burkhart. You can find him on Twitter at Jeff_Burkhart. And we're going to break down this loss of Kansas State falling on the road to Utah. And it's an unfortunate one. It really is. 74-69 final. And it's a really tough matchup here. Really tough thing that happened on the road against Utah. They've lost both their road trips, and the road woes look like they are back after falling these two games in Utah, one to BYU and one to the Utes. It's tough. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $100 in bonus bets if your first $5 bets wins. Check out FanDuel.com for more info. Jeff, break me down this game as we get into this one. It's really a tough loss from the get-go.
Yeah, it stings in a lot of ways. Just the way that you played so poorly at BYU, just got really overwhelmed in that first half and couldn't really ever recover, despite the fact that they made that little push in the second half against the Cougars to get that game into single digits, but they never really threatened. And this one, it was there for the taking. That was the tough part. You saw Utah, the building just not nearly as energetic as it was a couple of nights prior when the Utes knocked off Kansas. That was going to be something working to your advantage here. You knew you were going to get probably a not a lackluster effort, but a less than effort compared to what they threw out on the floor against the Jayhawks a couple of days prior. And you yourself, like, this Utah team doesn't really do anything particularly well. Gabe Madsen is obviously a tremendous three-point shooter. He's been at the top or the top three-point makes. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot on the scouting report that really scares and intimidates you about Utah. But they just came out and just really kind of abused you on the glass, got you into foul trouble. Defensively, Kansas State struggled at a lot of different points in the game. Whether the biggest thing was just boxing out. Utah missed plenty of shots in this game, but getting rebounds was just the killer for Kansas State. You never really felt like it as well. Just watching the game unfold when Utah pushed it out to 9, that honestly seemed like it did in Kansas State. Even though there was still so much time left in that second half, I never once felt like the Cats were going to be able to get to string together the requisite amount of stops to get enough buckets. And Brandon Haasen did everything he could. He was really the only guy kind of keeping Kansas State afloat in the second half, making clutch threes to get the gap down from 7 to 4 and then from 5 down to 2. But when it was time to just get the really pivotal, hey, we need to get a kill. We need to get 3 straight stops on defense. Let's see what we can do on the other end of the floor. K-State could just never do it. And this one, like I said, as far as the net ratings go, these teams are right next to each other, 72 and 73. So it's not like this is a bad loss in that sense. But now the game that was here for the taking is off the table, and as is your margin for error. If you have any aspirations of playing in the tournament, and now you're looking likely at a play-in game, you have to win out the rest of the way and likely need to pick up at least one in Kansas City. So this one would have given you a little bit of wiggle room. The fact that they dropped it hurts.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And Joe Lunardi, right before the game, had his thoughts about Kansas State and where they sat and where he thought about this game and what Kansas State needed to do in order to win at least one of those Utah road games. And that didn't happen. I want to get to more of those thoughts and where we think the road ahead for Kansas State is in just a little bit. But you mentioned it. There wasn't much to be scared about Utah in this one heading in. At least you thought so, right? This team was coming off a pretty interesting win, a pretty impressive win. They did beat Kansas. They beat the Jayhawks on Saturday. And of course, Kansas State was coming off a loss against BYU. And then you talked about Gabe Madsen, how he was their star player. He's the program history leading 3-point shooter. In the last 2 games, he's averaging 26 points per game. And Kansas State did a really good job, I think, with stopping him. And if you look at the box score, I mean, he definitely stepped up more in the second half, but he only had 13 points. He only was 2 for 7 from behind the 3-point line. He had 4 personal fouls, all of them coming in the second half, with a couple of them basically holding on to the jersey of Brennan Hawson to stop him from making some even more incredible plays that he was already making. But overall, I thought that what Utah is known to be good at, for example, they're 7th in the country. Heading into this one, they were 7th in the country in assists. Kansas State actually outscored them, or not outscored them, outperformed them in assists in tonight's game. Utah didn't do the normal things that you'd expect Utah to do. On the flip side of that, they did the things that they are really bad at, actually surprisingly good, Jeff. They were 353rd in the country heading into this one. Out of 355 or 356 teams, wherever the case is, they were only 2 above the worst when it came to free throw percentage in the entire country. They were 23 for 30. We let them get to the line for 30 free throw attempts in this one. In any other night for the Utah, when you're going against the Utes, that might actually be a good thing. But for some reason, they were on it tonight. They've had a really good home stretch against Kansas and against Kansas State, and they find out a win, winning by 5 on this one. Being able to stop Madsen was impressive. Being able to slow them down on the assist, not facilitating, was impressive. I don't know if you could calculate the fact or predict that they were going to be that good from the charity strike. Maybe that was their game plan in general, to get them to go to the charity strike and shoot and force them to shoot so many free throws, but it didn't work in Kansas State's favor tonight.
No, and that was honestly one of the bizarre things that just unfolded in this game, when both Gasson picked up 2 fouls extremely quick in the contest, and K-State doesn't have a particularly deep bench. Ugo Onyenso has been getting more minutes since getting reinserted into the lineup here a couple of weeks back, but he's still not somebody you feel totally comfortable and confident with, and knowing that he was going to have to really play some extended minutes for you was a little worrisome. And then Coleman, Hawkins, that was probably the more frustrating element of it, is that 2 of your interior guys, and Coleman just, he's very temperamental, and he's got those games where when he decides that he wants to clock in and play, K-State's really tough to beat. The games against Iowa State, when K-State and against KU, obviously, when he knocks down shots and he's distributing the ball and he's playing well on defense, got active hands, K-State's really tough out. But when he gets down and the shots aren't falling, he's turning the ball over, and or just getting lost on defensively, whatever the case ends up being, he becomes a detriment to the team. And again, K-State doesn't really have anybody interior wise that they can throw out there and feel confident with. And that was a tough part of this game. But the fact that the Wildcats were able to endure that and still be within arm's reach of Utah was pretty impressive in my eyes. But putting the Utes on the line, I think you probably would have felt reasonably good with that strategy, just given what you said about how they are such a poor free throw shooting team. And I'm sorry, the pronunciation eludes me right now, but I know there was one guy who was a shooter who was at 57% on the season and ended up, I believe he was 7 of 8 tonight. Again, it was just one of those nights where whatever whatever was going to happen adversely and be to the detriment of K-State's effort tonight. It was just, you never really felt like this team was going to ever at any point get over the hump. And like I said, those lapses on defense, getting crushed on the glass, all those things, it all snowballed, it all added up to a loss tonight. But yeah, that strategy, if that was what Tang went in with, thinking like, hey, like we feel we can be pretty aggressive on defense and we can put these guys on the line and still have a chance to in this game, that did prove itself out to be somewhat accurate. But But yeah, you probably don't go into this banking on Utah going 23 or 30 at the stripe.
Yeah, absolutely not. Utah out rebounded Kansas State 51-28. That's a problem that's been going on for the majority of the season. I think if you went back and looked at every single box score, I think you could probably count on just one hand how many times Kansas State has won the rebounding battle all season long. I mean, not just in Big 12 play either. They've really struggled all season long when it comes to rebounding. That's just a problem that they've had, and they have the big men to do that. This is not a reason when you got rid of a player like a chore. This is not one of those kind of situations. You have the type of players, the type of big men that can make that, but it's not really the physical asset that this team has really prioritized. And I personally think that if you get a chance to play in the NCAA tournament, if you find a way to run the table, you find a way to maybe play well in Kansas City, when you get to the tournament, I think that is going to be a huge kryptonite for them once that comes down to play. It's a physical tournament. We all know that. Obviously, the Big 12 is a physical conference as well, and you're starting to see that happen right before them. That it's just something that's just becoming a huge weakness. And even though this team is playing much better than it did at the first half of the season, that's still a glaring issue that has not been addressed yet. And I don't know if they're going to be able to fix the rebounding issue. I want to get more talking about the foul trouble because as it alluded into getting into the second half, it made them kind of make some changes when it came to how they played defense. And I was actually kind of impressed with that and how they controlled that. I want to get into that as we continue on here on Locked On Kansas State. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in it on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing the team for a late game rally or packing a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed the chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just with FanDuel.com, join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment count with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Hey, for your second listen, check out Locked On Big 12. They got plenty of things covering across the Big 12 conference. You want to check out Locked On Utes? They're probably talking about the exciting win over on that one, unfortunately, as Kansas State falls to Utah in the second straight road loss, 74-69. Jeff Burkhart joining me on this live post-game show here on Locked On Kansas State. You can find him on Twitter at Jeff_Burkhart, the host of College and Kimball. And Jeff, we're talking about this foul trouble issue on the first segment. And in the first half, they were tied going into the break. 32-32 was a pretty interesting half. Utah was really just shooting like crap, and they were just forcing them to go to the free throw line over and over again. We talked about their foul trouble. We mentioned how Moby had 3. Not only did Moby have a bad first half, the broadcast crew, I think you said his last name about 6 different times. That's definitely a pet peeve of mine growing over and over again. Coleman Hawkins had 2 and Gasson had 2. Going into the second half, going into the second part of the game, 12 minutes left in the game, Coleman Hawkins already had 4. He had to sit for the majority of the last half of the second half for about 8 minutes before getting back in there and performing. During that time, it looked like Kansas State forced the hand of Utah a little bit, moving to a zone defense. And when they were in that zone defense a couple of times, I was really impressed on how they performed against Utah. Utah really didn't have an answer for that. I thought Kansas State played very aggressive. I wish they actually would have played it a little more. What was your thoughts over that defensive play, especially in the second half for Kansas State?
I had no problem seeing them go up to the 2-3 there for a few possessions, and it really did seem to work. Again, in the way that Utah was shooting the ball, you certainly weren't really worried about them all of a sudden getting on some sort of a hot streak and knocking down 2-3 outside shots consecutively that just hadn't hadn't been their MO this evening. And that was obviously and Tang was like more or less daring them to shoot from the outside. And when the ball got into the painted area, they did a good job of converging. They forced a couple of turnovers out of it, and actually in a couple of instances were in position to get a rebound. I just saw a stat get posted on Twitter here that the offensive rebounding percentage for Utah in the second half, they got 48% of their misses, though. That was killer there. So there were some stretches where the defense was good and the Cats were in position to clean the glass, but more often than not, though, that was the tough part in this, was that they forced plenty of missed shots, whether that was going straight up man or throwing that 2-3 at him, a little bit of junk defense here and there, but just the inability to collect misses and limit second chance points was just killer tonight. Could not overcome that.
The offensive rebounds is insane. I just saw this in the box score as well. Utah had 21 offensive rebounds in this one to only 6 for Kansas State. Yeah, just allowing that type of second chance points. I'm surprised this game was only a 5-point victory for Utah, looking at how well Utah out rebounded. And then although they played really well at the charity strike, it makes you wonder if Utah would have been the normal Utes team that we've all seen all year long and shot half as good as it did at the free throw line, the way they performed right now, we would be talking about a Kansas State win. And then we would be talking about how they would have performed well. Like, would we have been talking about Kansas State being good, doing okay because they found a way to win one? I don't know, because there was a lot of things that went wrong in this game, and they should actually probably be a little thankful that they only lost by 5, and hopefully they can carry a little bit of momentum heading back home. They have a lot of days to think about it. They don't have to play again till Sunday when they host Arizona State. I got to ask you this question because it's a Kansas State podcast. I feel like anytime you talk Kansas State athletics, you got to talk about the jerseys. What do you think about those black jerseys with the purple scripts? I think they're pretty slick.
The anthracite, I love that. I love the look. That charcoal color. But yeah, I've always been partial to that. I loved when I was a student, kind of see it in the background there, the Michael Beasley cat scratch black jersey. That was earth shattering when I was would have been a freshman at Kansas State in 2006. Dating myself obviously a little bit there, but that was like the first departure away from just the very traditional and conventional purple and white. So I like them busting those out. And it's hard to go wrong with a lot of the unis that they have now. I love the two tones. I love the lavenders. I think Nike's done us a lot of favors. I will say I like a lot of the designs and what they throw out. So, we look good when we lose, but and I was gonna say I would much rather have them, wearing the old Woldridge era purple jerseys and finding a way to win on the road, but Woldridge didn't win on the road too much when he was coach of Kansas State. But yeah, no, they looked good, but hopefully we can see them, back when they get the whites on, when they come home here on this Saturday and Sunday, get a win.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. I do have a comment in it. I just noticed that we had the wrong rundown on the other side. Blame that on the sunglasses. I just fixed that. So sorry, folks, if you're watching now or if you didn't even notice, appreciate it. I didn't see any comments. Do have a comment, though, from Jake Stewart. The fouls killed us tonight. 2 players with 2 fouls in the first few minutes of the game, then 4 fouls each by halfway point of the second half, played not to foul out. No, absolutely. And you could see that right when Coleman Hawkins came back into the game as well. There was a few moments where he knew that, hey, he couldn't be as aggressive as he wanted to because he was 1 foul away from being fouled right out and sitting right back down on the bench. And there was multiple players that entire game that was like that. I think there was way too many easy opportunities. And I think that's where those offensive rebounds from Utah might actually come into play, where they had an increased level of those offensive rebounds because most of the big men for Kansas State were afraid to get that final foul or to worry about getting in foul trouble because those refs were not afraid to blow the whistle. The broadcast crew kept saying that this is a Final Four crew. This is a good referee staff. And to be honest, I really didn't have too many gripes about the refs compared to I have in the past about some of the Big 12 games we've seen so far this year, but they weren't perfect by any means. There's no doubt about that, Jeff.
No, they the flagrant call on Gasson was a little suspect. Don't get me wrong, he got his money's worth on that. He came down on him hard when he went up for that shot. But yeah, you do raise a very salient point there, is that the bigs for Kansas State having to go a little bit more tentative, and it's been tough to watch after Gasson had just such a remarkable streak, playing so well, not only against KU, against Arizona, had back-to-back 20-point games, the 22-point outing against ASU, followed up with 20 against KU. Coleman, Hawkins, in the same breath, wasn't really scoring it as much, but was just playing complete games. And again, this is one of those things where I think mentally, this is kind of what you've seen out of this team, is that when Coleman is mentally tough and strong and locked into the game and playing well on both ends of the floor, this team really does feed off of him. And he's a very captivating guy, very polarizing character. And when he kind of removes himself, if he's getting an unfriendly whistle or whatever it is, again, you just kind of see everybody else ratchet down the intensity. We're not diving after loose balls. We're getting beat on hustle plays. And again, tonight was no exception to that. And it was just unfortunate after this team had really felt like they had obviously turned a corner for so many reasons. Not only winning the back-to-back road games against Iowa State when they were ranked third, and then against against Arizona State, you follow it up with the monster wins at home against KU and U of A, and you really do think, okay, this team gets it now. They understand what they have to do. They understand how to play off of one another and whatnot, and then they just immediately, a little bit of adversity, they just regress right back to where we saw them in mid-January form. And that's probably been the most frustrating part of these last two games, has just been the things that we thought had been corrected, the things that you thought we had just surpassed, we're better than this right now. The version of Kansas State is better than what, this version that you're seeing of Kansas State now should be what we should see the rest of the year. Unfortunately, like I said, there isn't that mental fortitude that you want to see. There isn't that dog leader that in on the floor at any one given moment that's getting guys, hey, let's keep our heads up. Hey, we gave up an and one. Oh, hey, we took a bad shot. Oh, hey, we had a couple of turnovers. We got to get ourselves right. We don't have that right now. And that's, I think, why, again, some of those tendencies here, the foul trouble, not being disciplined on defense, not communicating on switches, a very critical moment in this game. Madsen, again, granted, Utah had been Arctic cold from three, but to give Madsen a wide open look, and I believe he pushed the lead back out when it was a 2-point game, pushed it back out to 5. That was one of those just little moments where you felt like, okay, you get to stop here, you get down, tie it up, maybe you'll have a shot to steal this game. But that was kind of the last straw in my mind when he knocked down that 3. I was like, okay, this one's pretty well on ice. But yeah, just a lot of little things piled up on this one.
I'm with you. And I like what you said about getting back to the mean, kind of a regression to the mean now, with Kansas State being back to 500, 13-13. They're now at a losing record in the Big 12 Conference at 7-8. What does that mean for them moving forward? Can they get to a winning record in the conference? And if so, is that enough to get them still dancing? Let's talk about that as we finish up here at Locked On Kansas State. $74-69. Utah takes down Kansas State in a battle out west in Utah. They're going to head home this weekend. They're going to take on Arizona State on Sunday. They got plenty of time to think about this one and think about this West Coast trip as they break the streak on the road, as you mentioned, with a really nice win in Ames against Iowa State, and then with Arizona State. And then they go back out west and they struggle. I had a feeling that they could have been a split. I think we talked about that the last time we spoke. We didn't get a chance to speak after BYU, but we spoke after the U of A game. And I thought we were both pretty hopeful about at least a split in this one. This is obviously the worst case scenario with them losing both of these games on the road, heading back to Manhattan for Sunday. Before the game, Joe Lunardi came on and they had a little bit of a delay tip-off. So they welcomed Lunardi, and he's one that does the bracketology for ESPN, big name in college basketball, especially when March Madness comes around, and talked about what the position was of Kansas State. And he said he had them, this was before tonight's game, He had them as the 75th best team in the country, which would be 7 spots outside of the tournament for the first 4 in Dayton, whatever the case may be. He didn't see the BYU loss as a quote disaster when it comes to the resume of Kansas State. Now, what he did say, and this is something that obviously now comes into play, that he thought that it was crucial, absolutely crucial, that they won one of these games on the road. This was heading into Utah's game right before the tip-off. Obviously, Kansas State falls by 5 points to the Utes. He said now, and this is a guy that I don't know how much pull he has when it comes to, deciding it, but he's usually pretty close. When you look at his bracketologies, then you look at Selection Sunday, he's usually pretty close. He has a good know when it comes to these things. He thinks if you have an above 500 record in the Big 12, he says, quote, should see them on the right side when it comes to the March Madness tournament. So with that being said, right now they are 7-8. There are just a few games left on the season before you get to Kansas City and head to Big 12 conference tournament play. Obviously, we've always talked about them have to going at least 1-1 in that conference. I think that might have to be 2 wins now. But before we even get that far, there's 5 games left in the Big 12 play, the regular season for Kansas State. You got Arizona State on Sunday. Then you go on the road and take on UCF. You're back home for Colorado. You're on the road in Cincinnati. And then you're back home to finish the year against Iowa State. There's no more back-to-backs for the rest of the season, wherever you are. But with 5 games left, that means that in order to get above 500, you have to go 4-1 the rest of the time. There is, if I'm correct, right? Because you already have a loss. So you can't go 3-2. That would put you at 500. So 4-1, is that doable right now for this Kansas State squad heading the rest of the way?
I'll say it'll be a tall ask. I think these next 3, and that was why I was so hopeful if they had gotten this one tonight. You look at the next 3, Arizona State potentially without Quaintance this coming Sunday. That's a game in Bramlage that you should absolutely take care of. UCF just went on the road and lost to Colorado, which was previously winless in the Big 12. And then aforementioned Colorado, which is 103rd in the net right now. So you're not going to have, these aren't going to be resume builders per se, but these are games when you look at it that you're lining up against teams, UCF 76 in the net, Arizona State. I don't know how they're still up in. They're 65th and they are 65th in the net, despite just continuing to take L after L after L. But if you had gotten this Utah game and you could have potentially gone on a little run here and strung together 4 wins in a row, heading into that road game against Cincinnati, then closing it out with the home finale against Iowa State, I would have felt a lot better. But again, the margin for error is small, and this team, just with some of the things that you've seen kind of come back around here these last 2 games. Don't get me wrong, like BYU's a tournament team, but UCF is not a tournament team. Cincinnati on the fringe right now, so you're not going to necessarily be playing teams that are like bona fide NCAA bid teams. So that's the good thing in it, that you're going to be going up against teams that you're fairly level with. You're not going to be playing in a bunch of raucous environments. These are going to be games that you will absolutely have the chance to win, but tonight was one of those as well. So you let this one slip away. Do you learn from that coming down the home stretch here? Do you at least do the next right thing? Quote that Jerome Tang recites over and over and over: do the next right thing. Well, the next right thing that you can do is going home, making sure Arizona State comes in here. This is a team that's been taking a whole bunch of L's as of late. Give them their medicine, get a win, get back on the right side of things, and then you got to go to UCF. It just, again, you got to be able to do the next right thing here. And again, I'm optimistic enough, just in general, just because I hate to just be a negative person and a downer on this team, and I've seen too much over the last 6-7 games to say that to just completely write this team off. And even tonight, this is one of those games where this could have very easily ended up as a 12, 13 point loss. There were so many moments in this game where you just felt like, okay, Utah's going to knock this team out. They're going to go on a little surge and stretch this lead out from 5 to 10, and this game will be done. And K-State just didn't let that happen. But again, the things that's going to separate this team from being an NIT or no postseason versus a team that is going to the postseason is whether or not they can demonstrate that they care enough and that they've learned from their mistakes. And hopefully, again, getting back at home, getting back on the right side of the column against Arizona State will be the first step in that process.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a wild chance that you can win the Big 12 tournament as well, and that obviously is your best chance of making the tournament for by far. I mean, that's an automatic, but that is a tough ask in one of the toughest conferences in all of college basketball, if not the toughest when it comes to that. My initial reaction for these 5 games left on the schedule, when I'm looking right at them, I think you got to just make a huge statement against Arizona State. You had a close win against them on the road. I'm talking like strong start like you had against West Virginia, strong finish like you had against Oklahoma State, like put the hurt on Arizona State, as you mentioned, be strong in UCF, be strong against Colorado. I mean, the next 3 games, I think you gotta go 3-0. I think that just to even keep your hopes alive outside of a conference tournament win, I think the next 3 games are crucial, where you're not playing in, you're making sure you're playing to not get out. Cincinnati, I feel like we always have a hard time on the road against Cincinnati. I've always felt that way. And then, of course, that game against Iowa State at the end of the year is going to be absolutely electric. It's going to be a very good game. So I'm hoping that there's one loss available left on that table just in case, because you don't know how Iowa State's going to play. They're a top 10 team in the country for a reason. Yes, we went in and kind of embarrassed them on their home court. They're going to look to be doing the absolute same to finish the year. And if they can find a way to maybe put a dagger in Kansas State's season, if there's an opportunity for them to do so, that's just a little extra motivation for them as well. So I think 3-0 absolutely is a must. 4-0 if you want to add Cincinnati, even just to make sure you have that loss available for Iowa State. But it's going to be a tough challenge. I think you're absolutely right, Jeff. It's going to be tough. I'm trying to be optimistic about it as well. But that all starts this Sunday against Arizona State. They have plenty of time to think about it. They have plenty of adjustments to make. I think that they have to find a way to get that rebounding a little bit better. That's something that is going to be such an issue if they get a chance to play in the March Madness tournament. And I think it's going to be an issue if they get down the road and get deep into the Big 12 conference tournament as well. The rebounding thing is just such a huge concern, and I hope they can find a way to adjust that. Other than that, though, this was a tough loss. This was a tough road trip, and you're going to have to find a way to bounce back. But after having that terrible start for the Big 12 conference play, then you bounce back against a ranked team like West Virginia, and you go all the way down and beat ranked teams like Iowa State and Kansas and Arizona. This team has what it takes to take care of business and finish the season strong, regardless of how tough they had it over this past weekend in Utah. I think we kind of all had this weird feeling that there was going to be a trap road series. This is the last back-to-back that they had to worry about all year long. No other team in the Big 12 had to have back-to-back road trips 4 times in one season. Kansas State was the only team in the conference that had to deal with that. That is now over. They no longer have to worry about that. However, that is no longer a crutch for them. They have 5 games left to take care of business. Jeff, anything else you got for us, and where can they find you in all your work?
Sure. Yeah. Just as we've already said ad nauseum here, just you got to turn and right the ship here this coming Sunday against Arizona State, losers of their last 5 and 6 of their last 7, with that only win in that stretch being against Colorado, as we've mentioned, the worst team in the Big 12. So again, you'll have an opportunity to get back on the right side of the win-loss ledger here in a couple of days. And you'll also have plenty of time to rest up as well. That's another thing everybody's talked about too. Not only do you have to go play this terrible stretch, and I believe there have been a handful of other Big 12 teams. I know Texas Tech's done the back-to-back Utah BYU series, and they're the only team that came out of it unscathed at 2-0, but Baylor split it. KU obviously has already lost to Utah. They have to play BYU tomorrow in Provo. And the way that KU has been playing on the road as of late, that would probably not be a favorable game for them. So that's very likely that KU's coming out of this 1-0-2 as well. So there's no shame, I guess, in that sense, in going 0-2 on this stretch, even though, again, you had the opportunity to steal this Utah game. But it is what it is at this point. And like I said, just looking forward to hopefully seeing the guys, hopefully after getting a few days of rest here, coming back to the Sunflower State, getting right against ASU. But with that being said, again, I'm on Twitter at Jeff_Burkhart. Really what I've been looking at here lately is just kind of trying to find some of the games that are coming up throughout the course of the week, and I'll be tweeting out matchups. So games that are being played that feature last four bye teams, last four in teams, first four out teams. So again, that's pretty much what my focus is. Like I said, I don't want to put the dagger in this season quite yet. So I'll still be monitoring and calling out who we need to be cheering for and who we need to be rooting against here for these last couple of weeks of the regular season. So feel free to give me a shout. And again, I'm for all the chatter about K-State basketball at this point, as tough as it's been to stomach this team at points, I love basketball, love watching this group go out and compete. So I'm here for all of it. So yeah, Jeff_Burkhart on Twitter.
Perfect. And we got plenty more Wildcats to talk about throughout the week. We are back Monday through Friday. I apologize about the delay and the wait that you've had if you've been looking for videos. I've been finding a way to see right now, rocking some sunglasses. And if that's the way I have to do it to make sure we get you content, that is absolutely what we are going to do. But until then, please like the video. Please subscribe. This has been Locked On Kansas State.